Ley from Freehold Township.
Thank you.
No problem. So I've seen reports that there's obviously been a lot of effects of COVID-19 in the school districts, and I was just wondering if you've seen any of those effects in Piscataway. I know that you were mentioning something about coverage issues, so anything of that sort, you can kind of take it in whatever direction you want.
So, Doc, you okay if I answer?
Yeah, in a public comment, normally what it is that the public gets to make comments, and it's not a question and answer period. And in this particular case, I'll defer to the
Yeah.
superintendent who can make some generalized comments about what you're saying.
Sure, we have some, and I'll reiterate what Doc said, and I'll encourage you to call my office. I'll be able to spend as much time on the phone with you as you need for a report that, whatever you're putting together. But yeah, we see some staffing issues, some transportation issues, some learning loss issues, all things that are well documented throughout the state is happening here in Piscataway as well. But we are, as you heard tonight with Dr. B, working our way as much as we can out of the issues that we've occurred coming back, yeah. And really, teacher shortages, people just don't, the job is hard, right? People just don't want to do it anymore. It's difficult, so. But I encourage you, please call my office, email me, my information's on the website. I'll be able to really spend and really have a conversation where you could ask me questions, I can answer them, and so on.
Okay, thank you.
And what I would encourage is that there's a entity, which is the Association of all the school boards across the state called the New Jersey School Boards Association, NJSBA. And if you were to put in these types of questions, it'll bring up a lot of information. There's many committees there, legislative, et cetera, and we often talk about what's going on there. The legislature knows what's going on, learning deficit, teacher shortages, bus driver shortages, et cetera. And they listen so that they can pass legislation to help with that. With bus driving and transportation, for example, you need a certain license to get that. So what the state will do is they'll look at those requirements and make them a little laxer without affecting the integrity of someone getting that driver's license, so that they'd be available. So there's an awful lot of information on the New Jersey School Boards Association, and if you Google that question in there, you'll get a lot of documents. This is our business administrator who's in charge of transportation, and a lot of times, for example, at the beginning of the school, when the transportation starts, and it happened here in Piscataway, is that the parents are calling in, where's the bus, this and that, and a lot of times they would say they're not answering the phone. It was such a situation so thin that some of the people that would normally be answering the phones in the transportation department were driving the buses. So it's that. So to answer, it's had a big effect, and I would encourage you not only to call the superintendent, but look up that as a resource.
Thank you. And I also heard about one of the students who was mentioning the mental health initiatives, and I think that those are great. That's come up in my research a lot, so
Yeah,
I think it's
thank
great
you.
that you guys are working on
Yeah,
stuff
we do.
like that too.
It's not just after COVID, but we really ramped it up because, students and families are coming to us in need of just more supports across the board. So thank you for mentioning that. We appreciate that.
Are you
Thank
a
you.
student, or are you
I'm a Rutgers student.
a Rutgers student?
Yes.
Well, see, with the proximity of Rutgers,
Yeah.
we are able to partner with the psychology department, and so as they're going through their graduate program, is that some of those graduate students come over and provide the free counseling in the haven that they were talking about. So we tried a win-win situation with nearby Rutgers. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Feel free, call my office anytime.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Do I have a motion to close?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is item 13, which is fiscal plannings and operations. Miss Lane, you're so popular. What's going
Popular
on?
this evening.
What's going on?
What's going on?
Be it resolved that the following motions identified as items A through H be approved as presented.
A second? A second? Okay. Any discussion? I just would like to ask David, there was one item in here that you had mentioned in fiscal last night that we were to be aware of, about the ending something?
The project?
Yeah.
All right. I think Dr. Kano is referring to item D. This is just the final change order. So when you do a construction project, you might have change orders, which are just kind of modifications to the contract for things that come up. This particular one is the final change order to close out that project. We actually had an allowance built into the main contract, so any of the items that came up were relatively small. In total, they still fell under the threshold, and you can see we're actually deducting the value of the contract by just under $14,000. But in particular, I'm glad this one is wrapping up because it's been going for a couple of years now, so. The main rooms have been done, it's been kind of little pestering, niggly items, so it's good that it's all wrapped up.
Okay. Thanks for that comment. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Board Secretary, please call the roll.
Mrs. Lane,
Yes.
Mr. Laughlin,
Yes.
Ms. Scotto,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Cordino,
Yes.
Dr. Connors.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Item 14, policy, Ms. Smith?
Be it resolved that the following motions identified as items A and B be approved as presented.
Second.
There's a second, any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Mr. Board Secretary, please read the roll.
Mrs. Lane,
Yes.
Mr. Laughlin,
Yes.
Ms. Scotto,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes?
Mrs. Cordino,
Yes.
Dr. Connors.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Item 15, curriculum, Ms. Cordino?
Be it resolved that the following motions, identified as items A and B, be approved as presented.
Second.
Seeing that there's a second, is there any discussion?
I noticed as I'm going through, sometimes this, it's a little vague with who's going. So like, for example, like when I looked at the ELL Institute, like I'm not sure exactly what the institute is. And so we just did WIDA, so I'm wondering, is it like kids that are in like a group? Is it kids who are like maybe only like on level 1, 2, or 3? So I think sometimes when we read these, they're just kind of generalized into a group, but maybe not specific enough to let us know who is part of this group.
So
So
is there any specific one, date, or that you'd like?
I just was given this as an example. So
Okay.
it's something that maybe we need to look deeper is being more specific when we're requesting funds for groups and trips on who is going on this trip, perhaps how many students does this accommodate?
Okay.
Just a thought, because like I saw here, we have this High Note Festival in Dorney Park, which I'm assuming is music, correct? It says High Note. Like, I don't know that Grace Lee, I'm assuming she's the music teacher at, or between maybe the middle schools? I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
they're all in my
Right,
office, so.
right. No, so, like, if I didn't know High Note was music, like, so, and is it everyone in the 7th and 8th grade band? Is it just, I don't know, certain kids in the 7th grade? Is it just the LEAP band? So I guess my concern is that sometimes when we get things to vote on, we're not giving full information on who these groups are and who is included and who is not.
What would you like to see differently than the way it's laid out?
I would maybe like another column that would tell you, maybe a little bit more specifically. I'll address these concerns later in new business. But what I've noticed, because it's something that has affected me, that sometimes you don't know there's a problem until you know there's a problem. So you don't know what to look for until you notice that something was missing. So I'm thinking maybe we need to add a little bit more detail when we're requesting funds from the Board of Education on who is included, maybe the number of kids that we are, so just something to think about. But I'm willing to move this.
Well, It was moved and it was a second and there was discussion, and if there's no
Okay.
further discussion, then we'll vote. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as that there's no further discussion, Mr. Board Secretary, please read the roll.
Mr. Laughlin?
Yes.
Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Cordino?
Yes.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Item 16, Pupil Services, Mrs. Cordino.
Be it resolved that the following motions, identified as items A and B, be approved as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seeing that there's a second, is there any discussion? Seeing there's no discussion, Mr. Board Secretary, please read the roll.
Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Cordino?
Yes.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Laughlin?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Put this at item 17, which is administrative and auxiliary. Ms. Scotto?
Be it resolved that the following motions identified as items A through D be approved as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Just a quick thought, and I'm not sure how it's done here. I'm assuming that, that the Piscataway Teacher Association was consulted
Yeah.
when we developed the calendar? Okay.
One other.
And the administrative assistant.
Dr. Connors, one other thing that I'm noticing here is that we have a person who's attending a number of landscape and pest management, ornamental landscape plants and pest management. And what I'm wondering is if that, given what Veer and Raheem were speaking about with their project for invasive pests, specifically the lanternflies, maybe any learnings and information could be taken back and they can consult with this particular person who's attending these particular workshops to kind of gain some further insights and maybe help mentor them.
Yeah, we'll talk to Billy Griffith and see what kind of info it really comes back and if it's appropriate, sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other comments, discussion on item 17? Seeing that there are none, Mr. Board Secretary, please read the roll.
Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Cordino?
Yes.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Laughlin?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
That moves us to item 18, which is old business. Is there any old business? No one has any old business. We will move to item 19, which is new business. Does anyone have any new business?
I have something I'd like to talk about. So you heard me vote no on the last 3 minutes that we read for October.
Okay.
So the reason why I voted no on that, because I felt like the information that was given to the board as far as an upcoming trip was not fully clear about the trip and who was included. So let me give you a little background. So on October 13th, we as a board approved band competition to Washington DC for April 27th to April 30th. It was my understanding that this was a trip which included the Super Chief Marching Band. The reason I believe this to be true was that it was communicated to both the Super Chief Band members as well as the parents that there would be a trip to Disney in April. A potential trip is what I should say, a potential trip to Disney. During the BPA band parent meeting in September, an overnight trip was discussed. That was planned for late April. The minutes read, and I quote, Trip planning is in the works. Details to come for the overnight event. Reflecting back, this seems purposely vague. During the October 6th BPA meeting, which was a week before we passed this in our resolution, or we passed it as a board. Again, trip planning was discussed. Planning in the works, details to come. We are waiting to hear from the school board next week and will post the info as soon as it is available, unquote. It also stated, and I quote in that October minutes, all band students are invited to come on every trip. If there is a marching band component to it, then they must march with the marching band if they'd like to go on the trip. Not mandatory to be in fall competition band, but must attend all spring marching band rehearsals related to the trip's performance. So you're talking about a marching band trip, or alluding to a marching band trip, which was not presented to the board on October 13th. On October 21st, a week after the board approved the band competition, an email was sent to band parents informing them of the details of the trip. The details included the dates and the destination to DC. It also included, and I quote, eligible to go. They would be 1, wind ensemble, 2, symphonic band, 3, concert band, 4, color guard. It also included the trip cost to students, which was $975, and chaperones at a cost of $650. It's also noted that the checks were payable to PHS and not to the BPA, which leads me to believe that the board is covering a bunch of this trip. Here's the concerning part. There are students in the marching band who did not take a band class and therefore are not included in this trip. Students who, because of 2 years of COVID, did not get an opportunity to be a part of a band trip. There was no trips for 2 years. We speak of the emotional well-being of our students, but no one considered the emotional well-being of the handful of students who were left out of this once-in-a-lifetime experience. Some students have dedicated 4 years of marching band, as well as several years of performing in band class. They are now being told they are not part of the band, and they are being excluded. Not to mention that it was clearly stated that all band students are invited to come on every trip, according to the band director. How do we as Board of Ed members, and as a school district who proudly promotes equity and inclusion, exclude members? These band members have been made to feel like outsiders and not part of a community they have dedicated their high school career being part of. What a terrible message to send to our students. It's also important to note that color guard has been included in this trip. It is my understanding that color guard only performs during marching band season. I'm sure the thought was to include everyone, as there has been no trip in 4 years. Someone planned for a specific non-instrumental group of the marching band to compete, but failed to consider a small group of instrumentalists. I find it especially concerning that neither a director nor a supervisor could find a solution to accommodate this excluded group of musicians. Furthermore, these students were never even told that they were not part of this trip. Imagine being excited to go on a trip and have friends talking about it and having no idea that you were not included. The word is heartbreaking. We can talk all we want about the social emotional well-being of our students. It is all meaningless when we do not truly think about how our actions negatively impact the emotional health of our students. These are the questions I would like researched, and I would appreciate if they could get answered. Why was the decision made to change the trip to Disney? That's the first one. 2, who made the ultimate decision to cancel the trip and arrange a trip to DC instead? 3, when did the band organization find out that the Disney trip was no longer an option? 4, what is the color guard competition that is taking place in DC? We have no information that we voted on as a board. It just said band competition. 4, how much money is the Board of Ed contributing toward this trip? It simply says transportation. 5, during our October 13th board minutes, under approval for student trips, why was the trip listed as band competition and the class group listed as PHS 9 through 12? If it was already known who would be attending and who would not, why was it left vague and unclear? This is not transparent. This is done to pass something without somebody realizing what was being done. So for me, I'm a person that now when it comes to my mind, I look at everything and I question. What else have I not know? What else is coming to me that I'm just assuming is being vetted in the right way? I have had confidence that all the information we have is transparent to us, always. I now have to wonder what is being left out. And I can say personally that when my husband brought it up in the meeting today, he was told, and I quote, "That sucks." So that was the response that was given when he brought up his concerns. You can see that my child is one who is not included. So needless to say, the fact that we don't think, that nobody thought about how to include a group of students and how to problem solve. We have 2 directors. We have a supervisor. Nobody can figure out a solution. And now, I'm going to be honest with you, a solution now is like, oh, your mom complained, and now, so know that what was done is wrong. It's wrong. It's not educationally sound. It is exclusionary, and it's detrimental to the social and emotional well-being when you define yourself as being part of a group and you're totally made to feel like you are no longer part of that group. You and a small subset of students. And I know that another student brought it up to a director who is not a senior, who said, like, I can't, because they don't have band because they have an advanced math, and was told, oh, well. So, again, I think we need to look closer at the way that we communicate, first of all. We need to make sure that when we arrange something, that it includes everybody, which is why I'm asking when these comes through. How do I know that there's not a group in the middle school when it says 7th and 8th grade? Maybe they say, oh, we just mean these students. So something that, because it affected me, it brought it to my eyes, which makes me wonder, what else do I not realize? Because you don't know until you know. So that is my piece.
All right, so if you get me those questions, and I'll have them answered, okay?
Well, thank you for bringing it to the attention of the board.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I cannot,
Sorry,
Uh,
I'm curious, like, when I was in high school, on the band trips, like, the marching band was there, and like, I don't, like, why weren't they?
I don't know. I can tell you I did a quick Google search last night of marching band competitions, and there's one in Virginia for the week of spring break. So if you really wanted to do one, you could have
Was it,
found
like,
one in driving
Overlook?
distance.
Like, what was it? Like,
I-
that would be awful, was Overlook. but, like,
I honestly,
Like
I
a
don't have an
typo?
answer. Oh,
Okay.
Prashant, did you have an answer?
Yes.
Okay.
Like, I'm so
Could you go
confused,
through
like, the
the
marching band's
chair,
always on
please?
those trips, like, what?
all right, I just want to thank you for bringing it up. You've got people in this room, such as Zoe, who was the past president of the
Yeah,
Super Chiefs
like,
Band.
it's
Yeah.
crazy.
I was a band parent. I drove buses to Florida in 2007 so they could march in the Magic Kingdom Parade. And it's legitimate concern. I would just say, in terms of process, we have to want to continually get better, have a continuous process improvement in the